we're here to tell you something.
You can become extraordinary.
We've filmed some of the most inspirational people on the planet to understand what it really takes to succeed. In Becoming Extraordinary, we'll explore the skills, knowledge, attitudes, and relationships to help you to realize your potential.
Because greatness isn't born, it's learned. So, who can you become?
In this episode, we'll meet the inventor, an American chemical engineer who has founded over 40 businesses, and the rebel, a Nobel Prize winning scientist who has challenged conventional thinking her whole life.
Hello and welcome to Becoming Extraordinary. Now this series takes a look at what we can learn from some of the most accomplished people on the planet to help you develop the skills and the knowledge and the positivity to do the exact same thing.
In this episode, we'll hear from two scientists, Bob Langer and Frances Arnold, two pioneers in their field who never took no for an answer and continue to show us that if you push the boundaries, anything is achievable.
Indeed, but before we take a look at how Frances achieved her Nobel Prize, let's see how Bob became one of the most talked about engineers in the world.
Let's see. So let's talk about Robert. Did you know he's the most cited engineer? All of history, actually.
Wow. He also won over 220 major awards.
Bob was the youngest of all scientists to ever be accepted into all three American scientific academies at the age of 43.
Wow. He also founded or co-founded 40 biotechnology companies so far.
How many honorary doctorates do you have? Because our good guy Bob, he's got 40 honorary doctorates.
Wow. He's also authored over 1,500 scientific papers.
Robert's research laboratory is the largest biomedical lab in the entire world.
Bob's pioneering research has resulted in new drug delivery systems, new vaccines, and tissue engineering in regenerative medicine.
Sounds like important work.
Indeed. Shall we watch his video?
I would like to, please. Thank you.
I grew up in Albany, New York, on a little street called Tudor Road, and not such a big house either. My dad ran a small liquor store, and my mom was a homemaker and took care of me and my sister. One of the things that I still remember very well were maybe 8 or 9, my parents got me these presents. They had a Gilbert Erector set where you could build this merry-go-round and a parachute jump. And then they had a microscope set where you could watch shrimp eggs hatch. And then they had this chemistry set, which was probably the thing I liked the most. I mean, there were all these little bottles of different chemicals. You know, you'd mix a couple chemicals together and some reaction would occur. Or color would change, and to me it was like magic. I've worked very hard my whole life. I mean, I've never felt like I was that smart or anything else, but then I have this, I guess what I'd call attention deficit disorder that didn't have a name for it then. So I'd have to read things over and over again to, really understand them. I'd like to say that the reason I studied chemical engineering is because I really knew from the beginning that that would be what I'd want to do, but that wouldn't be true. I went to Cornell as an undergraduate, and I had to make a decision at the end of the year what I was going to major in. And I was so bad at all the things that the physics and all those kinds of things that I just kept eliminating all the things that involved that, like engineering physics or mechanical engineering. And I did like chemistry, and so I chose that. So it was almost a process of elimination.
Wow, what an extraordinary story.
This man struggled in school. Like, it wasn't like he was gifted and everything just came to him. He had to deal with and overcome quite a few issues. He had ADD, but in the end, he's now gone on to be one of the most successful engineers and people that work in the science field that we know of. So I mean, that just goes to show, like, no matter how bad you might be in a certain field, if you just keep trying and if you keep following your heart and following your dream, you're going to one day achieve what you seek out.
What I find really interesting is that he had such a humble beginning. He wasn't from like a lavish family background or wealthy family, but just by receiving that chemistry set for Christmas, it literally propelled him into such an incredible career.
After I went to Cornell, I went to MIT. And when I was at MIT, One of the things that I spent a lot of time doing was helping start a school for poor high school children in Cambridge. And I really liked that. I felt like I could make math interesting. I felt like I could make science interesting. But pretty much all my friends went to the oil companies. They had high-paying jobs, and they kept coming to campus, and then they invited me to, go to the different oil companies. So I did these interviews, but then when I fly back to Boston and I think to myself, boy, they want me to increase the yield of this petrochemical by 0.01%, I thought, do I really want to spend my life doing that? I didn't know exactly what I did want to do, but I wanted to have an impact on people's lives. So I decided, after getting a good 20 job offers, to not accept any of them. So I started to think, what other way could I help people with my chemical engineering education? And I thought about medicine. So I wrote to a lot of hospitals and medical schools, but they didn't write me back. Then one day I walked into the lab, and one of the older scientists there said that there's a surgeon in Boston named Judah Folkman, and they said sometimes he hires unusual people. So I wrote to him, and he was nice enough to call me up, and I went over there, and he offered me a job. I learned so much. It was almost like being a kid in a candy shop. I'd see all these different problems that clinicians were trying to solve. And because I was an engineer, I looked at it differently and came up with solutions that they weren't coming up with that in some cases were better. I started thinking about, well, why can't you do chemical engineering design? Why can't you ask the question, what do you really want in a biomaterial from an engineering standpoint, chemistry standpoint, biology standpoint, and design it from scratch? That ended up being a very different way of thinking, and it led to new materials that we would then synthesize and design, and a number of them have become, widely used and have led to new treatments for brain cancer and other diseases. In terms of the work I've done that's the most impactful, I suppose it would be the drug delivery work, but in particular, the early discoveries and findings that you could create microparticles and nanoparticles that could deliver molecules of any size. And that has ended up playing a role in a lot of different medicines, including even today with the COVID vaccine. If you didn't have tiny particles, in this case lipid nanoparticles, the messenger RNA vaccines wouldn't work. I think that certainly has had a big impact on the world. I mean, it's a lot more than just me, but that was something that I helped get started.
He did have all those job offers from people offering him very lucrative amounts of money as well, but just didn't feel like it was for him. Like, he used his skill set and didn't just do what everyone else wanted him to do. He followed his own path and made a name for himself.
Yeah, and that's because he followed his purpose. He knew what he wanted to do, which is help people, and he just did that.
What is it? He rejected 20 jobs, 20 job offers, and he was like, not for me, and ended up working in a hospital. Just kind of shows what type of person he was.
And what's so amazing is that he thought he was bad at so many things. And what he did is eliminate the things that he was bad at and just focus on things that he was good at.
So he pretty much reverse engineered things he was bad at.
Literally.
And then he was just left with the goods.
Yeah, and now he's the most talked about engineer in the world. Check that out.
I guess I've always seen my purpose is to help people. And I've gotten a lot of satisfaction from that. Helping people by teaching, and I hope explaining things reasonably well. Helping people by thinking about research that could make a difference. And finally, inventing things and trying to bring those things, not just to do the basic research, which I really enjoy, but taking that basic research and bringing it to the world through patenting things, starting companies, helping the government, all those kinds of things. I'm more proud of the fact that the work we've done and the people we've trained have done good things than I am of the fact that, I ended up making some money in the long run. I mean, I never really expected that. If I had to give one piece of advice, I think the most important thing is to follow your passion. That's probably the single most important thing I can think of. I think that you want to dream big dreams. I think you also need to recognize that you're going to probably run into a lot of obstacles if you do that. And then I think you have to have a lot of perseverance, whatever those obstacles are, to, push their way through them, to walk through walls if they have to get the things that they believe in and care about to work. I've failed far, far more than I've succeeded. No chemical engineering department in the country would hire me. I got my first 9 grants rejected, but I believed in what I was doing. I thought it was important, so I kept trying. The thing I think I enjoy the most about medicine and engineering is knowing and seeing firsthand sometimes that we've made a difference in people's lives. I don't know how many people have thanked me because of, say, the Moderna vaccine or other treatments they've had. Seeing that we could improve people's lives, that's been a great thing to witness.
I mean, he said his purpose was to help people and impact people's lives, and you can see that through the drug delivery systems that he set up, the new vaccines, and he said how he's seen that firsthand.
And I feel like you can tell that he was doing it because that was his passion, that was what he wanted to do. Because like before today, I wouldn't have necessarily heard of this guy who is so vitally important for instance, just the COVID vaccine and the delivery system. So the fact that he's just continuing to do this, continuing to, do his research and help people just shows what type of person he is.
The truth of the matter is you have to take a risk, you have to call people, you have to make the effort to put yourself out there, because if you don't seek opportunities, they're not going to come knocking for you. You have to be really proactive in following your purpose and your passion, which is helping people.
And it wasn't even like one of these standard places he applied to that ended up finally giving him a call back, but turns out it was just a friend of his, and they were looking for unusual people. So even though he didn't actually go for all those high-paying jobs and possibly making millions of dollars right out the get-go, because he followed his dream, he ended up ironically making so much more than that. So I think that just goes to show that if you really try and stay true to yourself and not just go after the money, maybe that is the best path after all.
There are so many amazing and wonderful things that we can learn from Bob Langer's story, aren't there?
Absolutely.
I would say, number 1, follow your passion. Keep the passion, don't let it burn out. Number 2, I would say, don't be afraid to take chances. Look for opportunities, knock on the door. Don't be afraid to get shut down.
How many times did Bob get shut down?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to fail. That's the most important one, because we've failed several times. Bob's failed several times, but he kept going. And so I would say, finally, don't be afraid to just keep going, keep trying, don't give up, but keep that passion there.
We definitely had a lot of really interesting lessons from Bob Langer's story, but now I think it's time we learn about another scientist today, Frances Arnold. So what do you know about Frances Arnold?
Frances Arnold is an American chemical engineer and Nobel Prize winner.
A childhood idol of Frances Arnold was actually Christian Bernard, who performed the first human heart transplant in 1967. What an interesting idol.
Wow. Frances was awarded the 2018 Nobel Prize for Chemistry for her work on directed evolution of enzymes.
And Frances was the 5th woman to win the Nobel Prize. The first woman to win the prize was Marie Curie.
Frances is co-inventor on over 40 US patents.
In 2005, Frances co-founded a company that manufactures fuels and chemicals from renewable resources. Very important.
In 2013, Frances co-founded a company to research alternatives to pesticides for crop protection.
And in 2019, Frances was named to the board of Alphabet Incorporated. That's Google's parent company, making her the 3rd female director in its entire history.
Wow. Frances is credited with pioneering the use of enzymes to revolutionize the way we think about renewable fuels and pesticides.
Sounds really interesting.
It is.
I think I'd like to learn more about her via a film.
Me too.
I've always wanted to do what I want to do. I was an obnoxious teenager, no doubt about it. In fact, I left home when I was 15 because I didn't want to follow the rules of the family. I took on many different jobs to pay the rent, and I got to try different things. And one thing I learned is that I did not want to have to make a living as a waitress or even as a taxi driver, as interesting as that was. I wanted to have more autonomy and control over my own life. And I went to school some of the time, but I have a stack of truancy letters that my mother left for me. But I love to learn. So I studied hard, and I studied the things that I found very interesting, which at that time was mathematics. And I was admitted to Princeton. It was amazing because my GPA was very poor. But back then you could write an essay and you could make an argument for why you were worthy of this great opportunity to go to college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I studied engineering because it had the fewest requirements. But I also enjoyed the thought that I could build things, that I could do things, that I could work on the most complicated things on the planet. Spaceships, airplanes. And then I didn't realize that, in fact, the most complicated things, the most beautiful things on the planet were not engineered by human beings. They're the products of nature. I fell in love with chemistry at that point, especially biochemistry, because then I realized I had finally found the world that I wanted to be an engineer of. I wanted to engineer the biological world because that was the most beautiful functional machines that have ever existed on the planet, far beyond anything a human could engineer.
Were you a goody two-shoes in school?
Yeah, I was a bit of a teacher's pet. I can't lie.
Well, I mean, someone like Frances, turns out she was pretty obnoxious and a nonconformist her whole life. She rebelled against pretty much everything. She knew in her own way what she wanted to do, regardless of what society told her she should be doing.
Exactly, and she took risks. That's what I like about her. She said that she evolved, that she was able to adapt, that she was able to try something. If it didn't work, she would try something else.
Like, she's someone I really appreciate because she's had so many different jobs. You don't know what you're meant to do sometimes, or possibly what you're even cut out for until you try a lot of different things. She was a waitress for years. She tried taxi driving. And she even said that was interesting, but it wasn't what her calling was. And so she had to tick them off the list and try all these things before finding out something that she actually wanted to do. I mean, one of the big things here was that she got into Princeton with really low grades. Like, that's quite a feat, just because she was able to write an essay proving, you know what, maybe the school system wasn't for me. Maybe this standard system wasn't for me. I'm gonna prove my worth. I'm gonna prove I deserve this opportunity. And she got in.
I would love to read that letter. I mean, it must have been really good for someone that hadn't really gone to school that much. I mean, her mum got loads of letters saying your daughter's not at school. So what did she write?
Either way, I think it just really shows that her method of nonconformity and the fact that the system isn't necessarily fit for her shows that you don't necessarily need to succeed in the current system to make your name.
Such a good point.
When I arrived at Caltech, I finally found the job, the engineering job that would give me the freedom to explore. I decided to work on something that everyone thought was just crazy, because I knew that evolution was the most powerful design process, and that I could use that to explore the future of biological systems and biological molecules. And so I just did it, and it worked. It worked, and I knew it would work. I won the Nobel Prize 30 years after that. I knew that it was an important invention and that it was an important realization that I could share with other people. I don't want to change the world. It's a beautiful place, but I would like to make our footprint on this world more compatible with all the other beautiful life forms we share it with. I'm not sure I have a legacy for the next generation other than to be a teacher. I've been so lucky working at Caltech that encourages people not just to follow and do incremental work on top of everybody else's, but to really try crazy, hard problems. I absorbed that mentality when I came there, and I worked with young people who were crazy enough to join me in that. And I think that helped them have fulfilling careers. And that gives me more pleasure than anything else I've ever done.
By being someone that's like, I'm going to do something different, you can find a way like she did to use better products and make things a bit more better for the environment. I mean, there's a very famous quote that goes like, if you ever find you're in a room and you're the smartest person in a room, you should change rooms. Instead of just thinking conformly, she's actually able to challenge what her thoughts are and be like, oh, actually, let me think of it this other way.
And you can tell that she loves learning. I mean, she said it, but she loves working hard and she loves creating new routes for things that are ordinarily quite difficult.
Most people do what other people do. Many people think that that means you have to conform. I never suffered from that delusion, that conformity was the way to live. I always like to explore the bleeding edges. And to me then, it's the nonconformity that really leads to big advances. I think I've been successful because I'm willing to evolve. I'm willing to adapt. And I love that process of learning. And I hope to continue doing it.
What I love about Frances is that she advocates to try different things, experiment different things, be adaptable, evolve. And by doing that, you refine exactly what your passion is and exactly what route you want to go down.
Especially because I believe she specifically said she didn't just want that standard role that society had given her. She wanted to be more of her own boss in a way. She wanted to choose her own path. And I really respect that.
Yeah. A woman that's unafraid. I love that.
So I think the main lessons that I was able to learn from Frances was, 1, try things.
Yeah.
Go out of your way and try things. 2, don't be paralyzed by choice. And the third one would be to find what you love through experimentation.
So good.
As in, like, you're not really going to have many breakthroughs if you're going to be following everyone else's path. If you're going to be conforming, you're going to get the same results as everyone else. Whereas if you charge, if you form your own path, if you are nonconformist, you're going to be the ones to get those breakthroughs, to find things differently and to optimize.
Yeah, don't be afraid to be different. I love her.
So looking both at Bob and Frances, what are like the two things that were like commonalities there? Even though both of them did pretty bad in school, I think you can really tell that they're both incredibly intelligent people, just not fit for that system, you know?
What an amazing insight into Bob and Frances's world. And they are the perfect people to show you that you can walk your own line and you can be successful. With perseverance and determination, you can literally change the world and help others.
And it's not every day we get to hear from Nobel Prize winners, which is pretty great. I mean, it is reassuring to know that even the greatest scientists had to take a lot of time to find their passion and push through and find what they really had a calling for. So I guess the main message being, keep going, you never know, you could be the one to change the world.